Alright, so now that we've built the straight track, let's go ahead and put several straight tracks together and put our train onto the straight track and have it drive down the track. So we're going to go ahead and open up a new file, and it'll be an assembly. Hopefully it opens timely. Anytime I'm recording and I open a file, it takes forever. Alright, there it is. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and go to place, and I'm going to bring out one of my straight tracks. There he is. And open. And just going to put one there. And there are a couple of ways we could. I'm going to show you how we'd attach these guys. We'll go ahead and put two on here. So you should put two on here also. I'm going to show you how to attach them, and then we're just going to turn it into a lot more. So we'll go to Constrain. And again, we're going to use the insert constraint like we were using earlier when we assembled the train. And I'm going to say I want this, this little circle right here to be right in this little circle right here. Actually, they're arcs, but that arc in this arc right here. And you'll see that when it assembles it, it just flips it over. Okay. It's trying to guess what I want, and it guessed opposed. That's not what I want. I would rather have it be aligned. So when I click on it, then it goes right there, and I'll say apply. Now I'm going to go ahead and close this, and I'm going to go to one of my pieces of the track. I'm going to right click and say grounded. And what you'll see, you look at this and you're like, oh, that looks terrific. It's right where it's supposed to be. The reality is it's only got one constraint, that one insert constraint. So I can grab the second piece, and it actually spins all around. And that's not at all what I want. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to set it off to something like that. And I'm going to go back up to Constrain. And I'm going to put an angle constraint on it. And again, directed angle. And we're just going to leave it at 0 degrees, because if you remember, 0 degrees is parallel. So I'm going to say, hey, I want this edge to be parallel to this edge. And it'll lock into place, and I can hit apply. And now that track is totally stuck. It cannot move. Okay, so that's how you would assemble them together. Now, say we wanted 8 or 10 pieces of track. We could assemble them all the way, just like I did, but that gets a little tedious. So what we're going to do instead is go up to Pattern. So Pattern's right up here, Pattern Component. And for my component to pattern, we can just select one of these guys. It already selected this first one. That's fine. I could select both if I wanted, but it doesn't really matter. And I'm going to go to Rectangular Pattern. And I'm going to pick a direction. So this arrow is selected, and I'm going to say I want it to go along here. And if you remember, the track piece is 12 inches long. So for my spacing, I'm going to say 12 inches. And so it's not doing a whole lot right there. But let's go ahead and say I want, how about 10 more pieces of the track. And if you see, it's patterning actually to the left. And I knew that originally because it was showing me the arrow to the left. I want to switch. I want it to go the other way. So I'm going to come click this little button right here, which flips the direction. And now I just added 10 additional track pieces that have been patterned off of this one in this direction, spaced every 12 inches, which is exactly the length of the track. So if I hit OK, now I've got the 10 that I just made plus the 2 I already had on here. Actually, I take that back. When I say 10 occurrences, I believe it considers this first one, the one I used to copy, as one of those 10 occurrences. So I probably have those 10 plus the 1. Anyways, I've got a straight track. So now we're going to go get our assembled train. So we'll go back up to place and find our train assembly. So it's right there. And we're going to bring that guy in. And I'm just going to drop it over here. And I'm going to right click and say OK. Now I want to get this guy onto the track. And I'd like to orient him probably the other way. So I'm going to turn him. And I'm going to do a mate. I'm going to tell the top of the track and the bottom of the train to be together, and you can hear it snap together. And if you remember from the curve track, we offset it up 0.35 inches. And say apply. Now I'd like to spin him around so he's facing the opposite direction. So I'm going to do a flush. I'm going to tell I want this side of the train to be flush with this side of the track. And so it spun the train around for me, and they are now flush, which means coplanar. So if I look at it from the side, what you'll notice is that they are on the same plane now. That's what flush means. And it looks pretty perfect. So you're like, oh wow, we're totally done. But we're not totally done. We've constrained it vertically, and we've constrained it on this z-axis, but I can still move this sideways. And that's not ideal. So I'm going to go constrain. And again, I'm going to use a flush. I'm going to click on the outside of this linkage arm. And I'm going to tell it to be flush with the outside of the track right here. And then I need to look right at the back of the train. And I'm going to just play around with the offset until I feel pretty good about where it's at. So let's try offsetting it 0.1 inches. That's not enough. Let's try 0.3 inches. That's too much. How about 0.2? That's pretty darn close right there. So that's good enough for me. So I'm going to hit apply. And the train is now stuck on the track. So if I go back to an isometric view, we can see the train. It's nicely placed on the track. But because the track is grounded, and because this train is totally constrained to it, I can't even move it anymore. So what we're going to do now is go back to that flush constraint we put from the back of the train to the back of the track. So let's go to the train. I'm going to hit the little plus, and I have a flush. It's not this one. That's the one with the 2/10 offset. That was the one from the side. It's actually this one where I constrained it to the back. And I'm going to drive that constraint, which means I'm going to force it to change. So I'm going to right click on it, and I'm going to say drive. And it's starting at 0 inches. And remember, if every piece is 12, I'm going to go ahead and have it go like 5 pieces. So that'd be like 60 inches that I want it to travel. And I'm going to zoom out a little bit, and I'm going to hit play. And there goes my train down the track. Now, it might look a little bit like the wheels are spinning, but they shouldn't be. I haven't told them to spin yet, and actually I haven't even allowed them to spin yet. So we're going to do that next. So I can drive that flush to make the train go up and down the track. Now we want the wheels to spin accordingly. So two things have to happen. I'm going to close out of that. My train is a sub-assembly. And what that means is I built my train in this assembly called train assembly, but then I brought that into another assembly. It's kind of like a car engine. If you design a car engine, you build that assembly together, and then you take it and you put it into the actual car assembly itself. That makes this assembly rigid. So we need to make it flexible. So I need to right click on train assembly, and I'm going to come down here and tell it to be flexible. That now allows the wheels and the various components of this assembly to move the way that I want them to. Okay, so that's step one. Step two, we need to tell it how we want it to move. So I'm going to go back into constraint, and I'm going to go to motion constraint. When we did the curve track, we did this constraint called rotation, where when one thing spins, something else had to spin. That's not what we're doing here. We're going to do what's called rotation translation. So as we're moving linearly down the track, the wheels are going to be rotating. Okay, so that's the one we want. And we're going to do, we'll have to figure this out. Sometimes we get it right the first time, and sometimes we don't. If it's doing the moonwalk as it goes down the track, we'll just have to switch the direction of the rotation. So I'll leave it on forward for now. But I'm going to click, and I'm going to say, hey, I want this wheel to spin when the track is moving backwards. Well, the track's not really moving backwards. The train is moving forward, but it's all relative. It's actually, to the computer, it's the same thing, whether the track is going back or the train is going forward. So that'll work for us. Now, the distance right here is per rotation. So how far do I want it to travel down the track per every revolution of the wheel? Well, that's a big math calculation. So if you remember, when we created the wheels, it had a radius of 1 1/8 inch. I believe it was 1 1/8 inch. Okay, and circumferences 2 pi r. Okay, so if we say 2 times that 1 1/8, that gives us 2 1/4. And so 2 1/4 pi is really the distance it needs to travel per rotation. So if you followed that, good. If you didn't, I'm going to show you how to figure it out right now. We're going to say 2 pi r. So 2 times 3.14 times the radius of the wheel, which we said was 1.125, I believe is what we put in. It might have been 1.25. You might want to double check that. But anyways, that is the circumference of a wheel. So what we're saying is every time it travels a distance of that, we want the wheel to spin one time. Okay? And we're going to go ahead and hit apply. So now it has been told, that wheel has been told to spin as the track moves backwards or as the train moves down the track. So we're going to go back to the flush that we drive and hit drive. And let's hit play. And I can see those wheels spinning. And they were going the right way, so we had as a lucky guess. Because like I said, half the time we're not. Now it's going awfully fast, so what we can do is we can slow it down. I can come down to this double arrow right here, and I can go to the increment, and that's basically how quickly it's going through the steps. And maybe I'll slow it down to 0.2. And so if I hit play, now it's moving much slower. Okay, and I can actually see the revolution of those wheels. Alright, so now our train is driving up and down the tracks. You can also do repetitions. How many times do you want it to go back and forth? So maybe I'll say I want it to go start, end, start, and I want it to go 3 times. And maybe I liked it fast, so I'm going to speed it back up to a 0.7. And let's say go. And then here comes my little train. And when it gets to the end, it should just bounce right back and just keep going the other way. Alright. Now when you want to get real fancy with this, we can even go into the wheels and turn off the visibility on these axes because we don't need them anymore. We've already constrained the wheels together, and I really should have had you do that before, but we didn't, so we'll just leave it for now. What you need to submit for this is you're going to go in and just like you did with the curve track, record this, save that video file. Hopefully you can do an AVI because it seems to be a higher quality, and then submit that onto your Google Doc that's attached to the website for the Train Project 2014-2015. When that's there, let me know. Submit it on Schoology, that video also, and then move on to the next step. Good luck.